One question I have had about putting a motor on an antique white is whether or not the machine would act differently when I did that. Now, I say that because when I use the Spartan, the Singer Spartan as a hand crank, whether it's what I found out with hand crank embroidery, or whether I'm sewing masks or other things, is that the machine acts differently. When it's a hand crank, it's got a certain rhythm, and on the Spartan in particular, when you then put a motor on it and you're going much faster, it not only changes how you work, the machine itself does better in some ways, for example on embroidery, with the motor than it does with a hand crank. So I've been curious as to whether or not the white was going to be the same way, and that I would find that it's kind of a whole different machine when you change it from hand crank to embroidery. Now my other white is a treadle machine, and I've been making a few masks with the motor on this in the past few days. This is one of them. And now, at this point, I just need to go over the edges. Now, the white does not like pins. Whether hand crank, see, that's one difference right there. With hand crank, you can just slowly go over the pen, and it doesn't really change anything or make a big deal. I have to plug that in. But with a machine, if you're going with a motor, if you're going fast, the white does not like pins. So in doing a simple stitching like this, I don't really see any big differences. And what I'm eager to do is get to some embroidery with this machine. I have to find a small rectangular hoop of some kind. I have some whales I want to do, but I had cut them apart and they're only like 5 by 4. They're almost the size of this, so I need a hoop that would kind of hold that in place. But now you can see that the way I have this penned is going to go right under the needle, and if I'm doing this from the other side, it then gets involved with the feed dogs. The white does not like pins, so I'm going to move those out of the way. And this is, the brother didn't like going over pleats. Hand cranking, you have much more control over the pleats. Even hand sewing is, or a dexter with a longer needle, is better for going over pleats than some of the electric machines. So you can see that goes right through it, and as long as the pleat was under the foot, it didn't give me a problem. Now this, and remember white hand wheels turn backwards. When you get the needle at the highest point, what I was going to point out is that the original white foot is a hinged foot, and that makes it a little bit easier and better for going over pleats. And when you get the needle at the highest point, it's actually almost a turn and a half, because you have to make sure that the take-up arm, the thread take-up, goes all the way up to the top. One thing I will say is that this is an extremely powerful machine. Really well built. The early whites are well built, and I think sometimes in the treadle, and this was one of the reasons I wanted to get a motor for one of them, you don't see their full potential, because you put a fairly strong motor on this, And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, wow, this is as strong as the 1591 by Singer. So it opens up a whole new world to whites. Now, I happen to be able to get a really nice extra set of attachments for a white rotary. If anybody knows how you use this, let me know. It's made, I want to make sure it's in the view, it's made to fit a white. It's called a snip grip, and it's some kind of a foot, and it doesn't come apart. The spring is attached to that. So if you've ever seen one of those, I have no idea. I mean, is that a needle darning foot? It's called a snip grip. So I have to look into that. But the reason I bought the attachments, I didn't need the whole set of attachments, but hidden in the pile in the photograph was one of these. I have a video up about darning and a foot. I had seen one of these before, and I didn't buy it. It's just a regular spring foot, more or less a universal foot. And I think the video is, it's one of the darning videos on the white. But anyway, I had tried to make one out of copper, and the copper wasn't strong enough. So I think this one's made out of brass, but it's an original universal spring foot. And the white was the only machine I didn't have a spring foot for. This goes on the needle. In fact, the needle might have to go right through one of the holes here. So I have to fiddle around with this a little bit. So there are two fairly unusual little attachments that were in the box of attachments. And now this, it's like white went on a different path from Singer. A lot of the Singer attachments are made to fit on several different models of machines. And finding little treasures like this opens a whole new book to the white because it fits the white. White made their feet differently. The needle bar is slightly different in the way the needle goes in there. There's a longer section that holds the needle. And then to come up with something called a snip grip, which I can't figure out what that would do. So anyway, it's like a whole new adventure with a 1901 White Family Rotary, and it's really too bad they stopped making them. So when I get to the embroidery, we'll find out if it's easier to embroider with a motor on an antique white.